Hey, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Horror Film Lovers. I'm your host, Jonathan Moody, and I've got an awesome show for you guys. We've got my co-host here. How you doing, Sarah Adkins?
I'm doing pretty well.
All right, good. And we've got our special guest here. How you doing, Samantha Marie?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
You're very welcome. So I picked this episode for the month of May, and we're actually recording this the day before it goes out because it's going to go out on a Friday, which is not normal. But we were unable to get this done earlier, and there was a lot of stuff that just happened, and
scheduling conflicts.
Yeah,
but we got it.
We got it done. We're doing it, so it's all good. But it's coming out. So it's coming out, tomorrow, which is going to be awesome. But this is the fun thing about it is I picked Cabin Fever, very well knowing this is like one of Sam's favorite films, basically. I know it's his favorite director. So I was like, do you want to come on the show? And of course she was like, hell yeah. Anytime talking about Cabin Fever, she was down.
Well, you know me, like any podcast of the week, I'm like, oh, but this one I was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Right. Well, it's no Busted, which will be out next month on Indie Film Cafe, where
it's always funner when it's movies you like.
Oh yeah.
Oh, exactly.
Or movies you hate though, because sometimes those are fun to
It's fun to rip on ones you really hate, but at least you're not going blindly into it. Like, you've seen the movie, you know what to expect, you're gonna like it. It's not a mystery movie.
Definitely. And you know what? I think I told you this, Sarah, when I was watching it, maybe even you, Sam, but when I was watching it last night, it gave me goosebumps, like in the beginning of the movie, because it gave me this like warm feeling of remembering like the first time sitting in I was not in the theater for the first one. And that was because apparently, I guess it didn't come to my town or something. My town only had a few movies, did not have a lot back then. Nowadays, it has a lot more. But back then, it didn't really have as many. So I think it was probably playing at an AMC up in Hampton. But I know I did get to rent it, and I was really excited because all my friends said they hated it.
Really?
And yeah, all my friends are all like non-horror people. So I was like, ooh, because they're saying it's gory. What
year did it come out? Because I want to say I remember
2002.
Okay,
so 2002, yeah.
It's literally 20 years old.
I remember having the DVD.
Well, it's about 20
years.
And
back then, like, I didn't watch a whole lot of horror because, like I said, when I grew up, I didn't like horror. So for me, that was a newer one. New to horror, because I hadn't seen any of the classics or anything, and I'm more about the gore and the death scenes, so I did enjoy that. It was fun rewatching it since I haven't watched it since like 2002, and I watched it with my partner who's never seen it, so it was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I remember I grew up loving horror movies, but then I also love Boy Meets World, so it was like my wet dream. It was like Writer Strong and horror. I was like, oh.
Yeah, no, I was a Boy Meets World fanatic myself. So I look at this movie, I'm like, it's Sean. It's the sexy bad boy.
And like I was thinking, I was like, how genius was he? Because men who like horror, they're not like fangirls. Like, there's something to say about fangirls. Like, they're crazy. So he was very smart. Yeah. He was so smart getting Writer Strong.
Yeah.
I don't, from what I remember hearing, when I watched like some commentaries and stuff, Eli Roth wasn't even a Boy Meets World like watcher. He didn't watch the show. He wasn't even a fan. Like, he didn't do it because he didn't get picked writer because he was Sean. Now me, like, I would be like, oh my God, Writer Strong wants to act in my movie. Holy crap. I'd be kind of fangirling out.
Right? Yeah, you would.
Yeah, I would. But but Eli Roth was not a fan, and so he did it based on Writer Strong did a audition, and he did a fantastic audition and nailed it and got the part. Danielle Fishel auditioned, so we could have had Topanga and Writer Strong in the same movie. Yeah. It would have been weird because she would have played the Marcy part.
Oh no.
Yeah, no. She wouldn't have been Topanga, and I couldn't Yeah, that's just not her character. Like, it'd be fun to watch her, but at the same time, you're like,
well, it wouldn't have been Ryder and her, I don't think, because it was supposed to be like the scene that they were doing was apparently she was supposed to go to an outhouse and like start like using the restroom, right? And then she starts when she starts checking her like wiping herself, she'd wipe this blood off, and stuff, and that was never in the movie, so I don't know what I'm guessing that would have been Marcy. That sounds like the Marcy what is it, the razor blade coming up and everything scene. So that's what my guess would have been, but so she wouldn't have been, but she couldn't have done it because she does not do nudity. I've never seen Danielle.
Right. I was kind of thinking the same thing when you mentioned that. I go, it would have been weird to see her ride the, ride the guy.
And I read something with the character who played Marcy. Like, she actually didn't want to do nudity, and like her and Eli kind of like went at it for a while. And so because she recently was nude in, what was the spoof of American Pie?
Oh, Not Another Teen Movie.
Yeah, so I guess she was nude in that movie.
She was full frontal the whole movie.
Yeah, and so she didn't want to get stereotyped. And I was like, So it was funny because I read an article where she didn't want to show her butt. And apparently her boobs are fine, but she didn't want to show her butt. And he wanted her to show her butt. So they agreed that she would show 1 inch of her butt crack. And he actually got a ruler and measured like 1 inch of her butt crack and then taped the sheet. I was like,
that's
wow.
funny. You know what? And it's funny because I know you particularly, Sam, and I guess since this is back in 2002, was a little bit different. But nowadays, you really are kind of a fighter on, not
just
doing
unnecessary nudity.
Well, I mean, so are you okay with some nudity, or?
Well, I just think it's funny that like she had an issue with her butt. I mean, it was like everything else was fine, but like her butt was off limits. Like, that's a little weird to me. I feel like there's like a story.
Right, for all we know, there's a huge hideous scar on her ass or something.
Yeah. Like, I need to know
more. That she just hates.
I mean, I feel like I would rather show my butt than my boobs in a movie any day.
Right.
So Serena Vincent, if you're out there, can you explain this to us?
Yeah,
what is going on? I don't. Yeah, don't, please. You don't have to. Like, that's a very personal question. But yeah, I mean, I would understand. Like, when I look at that, I go, "Oh my God, that is kind of weird." That just 1 inch.
I would have loved him in there though on set. Like, just imagine like him like literally pulling out a ruler and having Eli Roth like measure your naked ass. Like,
right.
I'd be like, do it again.
You'd be there trying to take pictures and shit. No, it was I don't know. So so for people who have not like seen Cabin Fever, which I don't know why anybody would be listening to a podcast about Cabin Fever without seeing it, but
spoilers.
Sam, how since you've seen this movie probably way more than we have, how do you explain this movie to somebody who hasn't seen it?
Pancakes.
You know what? I was friends with that guy in MySpace for years.
I love the fact that was all like he didn't write that. It was all just like a random coincidence of how that got, started. So
yeah, that was amazing. But no, like explain like the story like a little bit of what so people. I mean, can
so you got like your hillbillies, and you got this like flesh-eating disease, and you have some horny teens that want to camp and get drunk, and shit goes down. Okay. I mean, he Eli Roth, like, this is like since his first director debut, like he really said that he stuck to the recipe. Like, he really wanted to stick to the recipe, like gore, boobs, sex,
right, your typical horror movie stuff.
Yeah, and I think he checked all the boxes.
Yeah, a lot of panicking and a lot of decisions where I'm like, why would you do that?
Right.
I was like, a lot of their irrational decisions was just a lot of, okay, well, why would you choose to do that? Just walk away.
Right. Yeah.
It's
a
funny.
lot of like,
What were you saying, Sam?
I was gonna say just like a lot of body horror and like just humor and then just really dumb decisions. Also,
Right.
he put like a lot of his like horror icons, like he layered it in the movie. So I thought that was really fun to watch it and then be like, oh, that's that's Texas Chainsaw, or oh, that's it was really fun.
Oh yeah, the Texas Chainsaw homage with Serena Vincent walking up to the house.
Yeah. Or like very end when the guy gets shot, they're coming for you, Barbara.
Yeah.
Like
or my other favorite thing is like he uses music from David Hess, who I'm not just a huge fan of, but I've met the guy, and he actually at one point he did give me like an A-OK to talk, well, this was when he was alive, obviously, back in like 2010. He gave me the okay to use some of his music. So he just said, talk to his son. So I did talk to his son later after his death, and to make sure that was still gonna be okay. And he has said, as long as I have something going, or whatever for it, he would do that. And I thought that was really cool. Like, that's indie, and that's pretty much what I think David Hess was probably friends with, met Eli and said, I'll let you use my songs from Last House on the Left. I mean, that's one of the most fucked up movies ever made. And they use like 3 songs and a remix of one of them.
I read an article where he said that he didn't ask. He just did it. And then later they were like, okay, yeah, it's okay.
Well, they probably paid, like Lionsgate probably paid, him off for that, would be my guess after that. That's funny that they would just, that's the indie, like guerrilla style filmmaking kind of thing.
That's what he said too.
Yeah.
He's like, everybody can enjoy it, just not Wes Craven's lawyers. Like, let's not have them watch any of this.
That's funny. But yeah, no, it was great. I absolutely loved every single thing in this movie. It's a lot of fun. It's got a really sick and twisted humor that you can't see today. Like they couldn't get away with the N-word being used in the even though it was a great joke that set up that you did not know was a joke. You thought it felt really serious at first. At the end of the movie, you saw it was all a setup for like a joke.
And then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, I was in the theater and I still remember, like, you could just feel the white people get uncomfortable. They're like, oh God.
That's true. And you know what? It was shot in, I believe, North Carolina. Not very far from me. And I actually kind of want to go down to that area at some point since I'm not too far from it. And
that'd be fun.
Try to rent the actual cabin and go camp out. That'd be fun.
Yeah, could you shoot a movie there, or would you get in trouble? We
probably rent it. I think you could probably rent it.
Right. If you rent it and have permissions or worry about it later,
just change enough stuff. Like, that's not the same place. Prove it.
Right.
Well, I mean, what could people do? Because then people just be like, oh man, they just ripped off the cabin fever cabin, or whatever. And like, why not?
Just like the 2000s.
People would be able to tell that it's the same cabin. Especially since this is an older movie and they have remade it so many times, like it's off people's radars, and I don't know if people are picky enough to notice, like, oh, it's the same cabin, like it's a cabin, like
it's a cabin in the middle of the woods,
right?
What were you gonna say, Sam?
Oh no, I don't know. I was gonna say something about the Cabin Fever remake, which is like what, like, not even like 15 years later or something. I don't know.
Which made
I
no
haven't
sense.
Watched the remake or any of the sequels, so
I watched the sequel, which was done by Ty West, who is amazing and has been doing really well even recently. But it was just honestly that seemed like a paycheck movie because I just did not like the sequel.
Yeah, it wasn't the same. I mean, I liked it. It was like entertaining and funny. Like, it was so dumb, it was funny. I don't think it was like the purpose, but you could definitely tell it wasn't like the high quality that the first one was, but they were fun in their own right. But the remake was like, I was still so confused, especially since Eli Roth like gave his blessings and was like, you know, executive producer of it. I was just like, so like, I didn't understand the point, especially since it was literally like verbatim, like the same fucking movie.
Right. No, it was shot scene for scene, you know.
Yeah, I don't understand
which was the Psycho
Seemed to have a
thing.
point.
You know, Psycho did that. Like they did that with Psycho, which made no sense too. Like, I mean, why do a shot for shot remake? Why even?
At least Psycho was a little bit, but wasn't that longer though? Wasn't there like a longer in between period? Or was it about the same?
I could see if the movies were like really far apart, but I don't think this movie was old enough to get a remake.
Yeah, well, not even like even a remake. Period. You could make a part 4, and it would have been fine because they made 3 of them. So making a part 4 would have just been fine. But doing a shot for shot remake, you know what? I mean, I hate saying this. This is going to sound terrible, but Eli Roth probably gave it his blessing so that he could say he was compared to Hitchcock a little bit, you know? Like,
well, also, I think he did it because he was executive producer, so he can cash in on royalties. Because I know he said with Cabin Fever, he didn't really make a lot of money. He only made like upfront money. And then, like, you know, it made like millions of dollars and he's not getting any of that. Like all the royalties and stuff are going to like the, you know, people who invested. So he probably did it to get some money, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was an executive producer on the 2nd and 3rd one, if I'm correct. So he had like no involvement with those. So when he was asked probably to do that, you're probably right. He probably thought, you know, why not? Because now I'm actually going to get money off this movie, you know?
Right.
Which... if you're gonna do that, it was like, he should have said, why don't I just remake it? You know, like why didn't Eli just remake it and just sort of do a different version of it or something? You know,
well, maybe he thought that people would watch the remake and be like, wow, this is garbage, and then it would like make them want to rewatch his movie. So maybe like he just had this whole like really smart plan.
Right.
You should have asked him that, you know. I
didn't think about it. I have conversations with him in my head that like I didn't actually have. So
oh man, you know what? I would love. He's one of on my bucket list of people I'd love to interview someday, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like he would be a dream to just like chat with because he knows so much about horror. Period. Like I remember hearing an interview with him, and he said for his bar mitzvah. He did like was it not Texas Chainsaw, was it Evil Dead theme or something? He did some kind of theme where he was like had a chainsaw and he would be chainsawed in half or something, you know, and things like that. And I just thought that was freaking cool, like that he like since a very early age he was into horror, you know, and stuff. Not like me. And apparently not like Sarah too. I don't know about you, Sam, but like when I was a kid, I was into Ghostbusters, but that was like the closest thing to Ghostbusters and Jaws was the closest thing to horror I was into at that time.
I mean, in my baby book, my mom wrote the first time I went to see Nightmare on Elm Street, like in a drive-in. So I pretty much like grew up being scared.
My parents didn't like horror movies, so they weren't really in the house. And then I was just terrified of everything because I had anxiety really bad. So I don't know. I tried and it just didn't work out for me. I have an overactive imagination and I thought it all was real. So once I got to be an adult and I realized that it wasn't real, it was cool. I could watch them. But when you're that little and you watch E.T. and you live out in the desert, and I watched Tremors living out in the desert of Phoenix, Arizona when I was like 8, though. Like now I watch, I'm like, oh, it's hilarious. But when you're that little and you're literally out in the desert and you watch this movie your mom tells you to close your eyes for, but you don't, you're just like, shit.
Yeah. So Sarah, you just happened to mention like one of my other favorite movies, which is Tremors. Love Tremors. Like I'm a huge Kevin Bacon fan.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, I watch them now when I'm older. Like I didn't really get to watch them till I was in my 20s. Because it was when I finally like got out of the house, out of school, and in my 20s when I met my ex-husband who's a horror movie fanatic and showed me all these movies that I was too scared to watch. And then I was like, oh, okay, these are funny. I was an idiot. Like these movies are pretty cool. It just my child brain was like, Tremor's gonna come up and get you.
Right.
This sounds terrible, but I still to this day have not watched Hellraiser all the way through. I've watched.
I'm not a huge Hellraiser fan. I mean,
I've
don't come for
tried.
me. Don't come
So
for me.
I've tried. Yeah, like that's kind of what I felt. But in the beginning, the first time I saw the gore, and the gore turned me off. Like I just was like, oh, like why do I want to watch something gooey and nasty like that? Right? Like when I was a kid. When I got older, I started watching it because of the gore, but I got bored. I was like, I can't get into the story. It's a haunted house story, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're,
So, I'm gonna definitely like make myself sit down and watch the first one again at some point. Just
and they're not all good. They made a bunch of them, and I haven't
like
even
9 of them, right?
Yeah,
like
but it's like it's one of those things where they make a lot, and it's like 2 or 3 of them are really bad, but 2 or 3 of them are pretty good. And you start to understand a lot more about the Cenobites and stuff like that later on, because it's like a whole hell world and demon situation, and I think a lot of the fandom is the artistic view of the Cenobites, because they are each one is so artistic looking and so individual and all this stuff, because that was another collection that we had, that I owned like every action figure of at one point, and it was very like the storyline wasn't the best, but like it was the Cenobites were very artistic.
Yeah. Well, and now that you say that, like every time I think of it, I always think of, what was it, Chatter? Chatter?
Yeah, Chatter.
Yeah. I mean, that was a crazy setup.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, the main reason I brought this up is because Cabin Fever was one of the first movies I'd watched that actually had like that amount of gore back into it, and I was like, but it had the humor, like
right.
I think that's what I really liked about it, was I liked the humor.
It had the gore, but the gore was also like very red and colorful. So it's like it was realistic, but not realistic. Like it was good effects, but it was also like not too realistic to where like it turned you off. It was just good, and it was good, but it was also, like I said, it was very bright and stuff like that.
Well, I didn't realize that K&B did the effects, and K&B are like the guys who did like From Dusk Till Dawn and tons of other fantastic films. What?
Yeah, I liked the effects. Effects are great, but it's just very gooey and very colorful. So like it caught your attention. Like it was good effects, but like I said, it wasn't too realistic to where like freaked you out, but it was to the point to where you're like, oh, that's awesome, that's gnarly.
Yeah.
So who was?
I mean,
go
I
ahead.
was trying to think before this movie, before I seen Cabin Fever. I'm like trying to like racking my brain here, thinking of like what movie I saw before this was like equally as gory. I can't really think of anything.
Not Nightmare on Elm Street 4. That was pretty, or 5. One of those two had like a real. Both of them, I think, had a huge amount.
You know what? I think because I grew up with those, like for some reason, they just don't come off as. I think I'm just I'm just too desensitized, I think. I don't know.
I don't like, but see, that's the funny thing is we live in a post-Scream world now, where Scream was the first movie to really not do gore. The gore was not huge in Scream. There was some, but it wasn't like that. Wasn't the point of it like it is in like Cabin Fever. The point of it is like we're gonna. The gore, the better,
Right. Basically. I mean, it's about having a disease. There's going to be sickness, which it's kind of a misleading title to some people, I found out, because it's like they took it literal, like it's cabin fever, like you're in a cabin, you have a literal fever, you're literally sick. Where some people, they read that and they're like, oh, I thought it was going to be just stir crazy people who had cabin fever murdered each other.
Well, no, but that's sort of what happens too in the movie.
Because like, the fun fact is not one of the main characters actually dies from the disease.
Yeah, no, none of them do. They all die from the hands of each other or somebody else outside of each other.
Most of the hands of each other, though, was the fact that they were dying from the disease and they were putting them out of their misery, not a murder spree like a crazy person.
Right. Well, except for fucking poor what's his name? Didn't even have the disease.
Bert.
Not Bert.
The blonde-headed thing. And you knew the minute he went in that house that the cops were going to show up and murder him.
Right. Well, and he was such an a-hole. Like you were almost like, God, when's that guy going to die?
Yeah. Right.
But that was one of those moments too where I was like, okay, so you've been hiding this whole time and you made it, right? You won't go near anybody who's sick. You won't touch blood. You step in the doorway, immediately said dead bodies and blood everywhere, and you go inside. Wouldn't you back away and just run? Like,
if he was sticking to his own logic, he would.
That didn't fit his whole logic through the whole thing was, I'm not touching it, I'm leaving.
Right.
So like finally, like he breaks that and he's like, but you're saved. You haven't been in contact with it. You're gonna go in the house full of it? Like that doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't. That was probably the dumbest part of the movie, but because they set up for the one bit where he said, I made it, and then gets shot.
Right.
You know, right? Yeah. Like, so like they set that up, which he could have done that, where he could have looked in and said, right, oh my God, I made it. But like, really what that shot really was us, the audience, seeing the disgusting house by the end.
To us. They wanted to show us the carnage, but it didn't fit his character out.
Yeah, so it's kind of wrong. So that's one of those things I think you were talking about, Sarah, where you're like dumb moves, like dumb.
Right. Well, and also like with the truck, you know, like we haven't really normally like we go like scene for scene with the movie, and I know we haven't really done that this time. Right, but it's like the truck scene, you know, where the guy who was sick got in their truck. It's like, why would you smash up your own truck? I understand trying to pull him out when he's trying to steal it, but the fact that they smashed that truck up so bad, trying to like, I'm like, that was a little excessive. Like, I don't think I would have smashed the truck up like that much trying to scare him out of there. And the minute he coughed all over those windshield, I would have let him have it. Like the minute you saw blood all over the windshields, I would have been like, step back, like, nope. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, because after them, what can you do? You can't ride in a you know, like without potentially contacting the disease. You know, contracting
and I know that was a lot of adrenaline of, oh my God, you know, but yeah, no, when they should have done exactly what the dumb drunk guy did when they opened the door, shut it, and be like, nope. But you know, they opened it and they got involved. They should have just shut the door and been like,
that. They got involved.
But then there would be no movie.
There would be no movie though if these kids weren't dumb idiots.
I know. Like, see, this is the sort of thing that I guarantee you Paul would hate this movie. And mainly because Paul hates people, like kids who just bicker the whole time. And that's all this movie is just bickering at each other the whole time. And but see, the thing about this movie that's different than like most low budget indie horror movies that we watch on Indie Film Cafe is that like the bickering means something. Like there are
the characters in this sense.
Yeah. And it's sort of like something where it's really funny, but nowadays we're kind of in a post-COVID world where we're not over it yet or anything. It's still out there. But what I'm saying is, like, you know, in the beginning when we first had COVID, if you walked down the street and you coughed, people ran away from you.
Right.
Because they were afraid they were going to get it too, you know, or whatever. And that's sort of what this movie has. It has a very much like that. It feels really, you know, sort of right to watch nowadays because, you know, it's sort of perfect to watch because like this is how we treat each other. You know, like I don't want to get sick. You guys touch somebody. I'm running. I'm getting the fuck out of here. I'm leaving you guys. I don't care. It's me against you guys. I'm going to survive, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And instead of sticking together and trying to survive together.
Which, well, and they locked poor Karen out in the shed. And at that point, I'm like, I mean, if she's already locked up in her room, why not just leave her locked up in her room and don't go near her? Like, what's the difference between putting her in the shed and locking her up in her room, except for the fact that now she's vulnerable to the dog and to whomever else, and now she's even more scared and upset. Like, why wouldn't you just let her stay locked up in her room and just stay the fuck away from her? Like, that was just mean. Poor Karen.
I don't think they knew what it was. So maybe they thought like it could have been like airborne or like who knows. But I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, at that point, they're touching her and carrying her when they could have just like, so far at that point, only one person had touched her. The rest of them hadn't. They could have just shut the door and be like, okay, we're not contaminated. We never touched her. But instead, they all lift her up. They all touch her. They all move her. And by then, okay, well, now everybody's contaminated, you know?
Yeah. But that scene leading up to it, God, I remember watching that in the movie theater when he was like, you know, He was like getting in there. And then you could hear it. Y'all remember like the sound effects? And I was like, ooh, she's wet. Oh, wait, no, that's more than being wet.
Yeah. So honestly, that scene hit differently now though, because like when I watched it now, I mean, she flirted with him before. She kind of was doing the whole like, I'm gonna kiss you for the moment and then go away. But she never actually put the moves on him or consented to anything. So the fact that she was sick and asleep and he just started touching her and then did that really kind of upset me, because he did not have consent for that. He was molesting her.
Yeah. It was sort of rapey, and that
it was very rapey because he did not have permission to touch her.
It's so funny because once I said this earlier, but like this is a movie that just can't be made today. Like it can't be made because like there is so much sort of things that we're against now that this movie sort of had, because at that time it was sort of more acceptable or more it wasn't bothering people.
Besides flirting and giving him that kiss and running away though, like they didn't have any sexual stuff going on. So for her to be sick and passed out laying there and him trying to comfort her and then all of a sudden touching her face and then putting his hand down there, is like, to me that was very icky, because especially as people who have been put in those situations before, when you're drunk or passed out, you're like, cool, this guy's rapey. Like this went from a nice crush to I don't like you anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of thinking it was sort of like that thing we discussed earlier in a way, like, go for it, and then, don't ask for permission, and then, whatever. And that's sort of what it was in that situation, because he didn't ask for permission, and he sort of waited, and then I think he was thinking she was going to probably say, no, stop, right? And if she said stop, he would have stopped.
Right. That doesn't really work in society either, though. You can't just molest a girl until she tells you to stop. But I do remember back then when I watched it, though, and I didn't have the trauma I have now watching it, going, oh, okay. And then that leg thing, though, like when you realize that he's not touching what he thinks he's touching, that he's actually fingering her leg hole, like that was pretty gnarly. Like I do remember thinking that was the gnarliest scene, when I watched it when I was younger.
Yeah, he pulled his hand back and that's when it started. That's when the movie started. It just went downhill from there.
Yeah, it really did.
Oh my goodness. So my favorite character in the whole movie was Bert. I don't know what you guys who you guys like the best. Who did you guys like the best? Sam.
Which one was Bert, the drunk one?
Yes.
Okay.
Sam, who was your favorite?
Well, I don't know. I was gonna say Ryder, but now after the whole rapey talk, now I'm like, I feel like I can't say that.
But that's the only thing. He's still I would still vote him my favorite, but I do think that they should have done that a little differently.
Because honestly, like when I first seen that movie, like you said, like that didn't even none of that ever crossed my mind.
It doesn't cross your mind back then.
Yeah, like Innocent 2000, because he wrote that movie in 1995 too. So innocent little Sam who was just watching this movie, ooh, Ryder strong,
Yeah, no, really, little teenager Sarah was all about it, but adult self-aware Sarah was like, oh no.
I don't know. I don't really know if any of these characters were really written to be liked though. In a way, I mean, maybe the blonde girl. Because I guess
Karen. No, because she was kind of a bitch too. Because she was teasing him. She was doing the whole, "I'm your friend, and you have a crush on me, and I'm hot, so I'm just gonna kind of tease you."
She was also sort of gross at one point, where she's talking about this guy comes up and kisses her, and she's just like, "Ugh,"
Right?
How dare you just And
she was being bitchy about it.
Then again, it also sets up for it sounds terrible, but it also sets up for the fact that she gets these guys doing these things that she doesn't want them to do necessarily. That they do, At least he didn't. He sort of didn't they sort of had permission both to kiss each other, because she said this stuff, set it all up.
Because he's like, "Hey, I like you," what if we kissed,
Yeah.
I mean, all the characters were pretty much the typical stereotypes.
Right. Yeah. All the people in high school that you just kind of are like, eh.
Yeah.
I think the cop deputy. Maybe he was my favorite.
I call him Officer Doofy. I don't know if that's what he really goes by, but
Winston was his name, and I loved him. He was Giuseppe Andrews, and
to be that part. Like he actually wrote that for him, but then the guy who did it like auditioned. He was like,
that reminds me, like Kevin Smith wanted to play Randall, until he realized Randall had so many lines. It was like, give me Silent Bob. I don't have to say anything. And then gave that to Jeff Anderson. But that was the funny thing is like, you said Eli Roth wanted to play him, and then he was like, oh no, this guy's so much better. And the guy he was so
good.
I mean, and then he also gave himself a part, if I'm correct. Eli Roth gave himself a part that was written for somebody else. It was written for somebody else, and then that person wasn't able to come, and so Eli had to play him, and Eli did I think a little bit different than what he was going to give to the other guy. He made himself a skater who was
that the old rocker dude with the dog?
Yeah.
Okay. When he came on, I'm like, man, this fits 2002. It looks, like a little bit like Sully from Godsmack and Pop Roach, like new wave metal guy coming in here with this giant fucking bag of weed.
Yeah, man.
Back in 2002, you were like, oh my God. Now you're like, oh, my neighbor has that. But like back then, it's like, he came on the screen and I couldn't help but giggle because, this movie came out as a freshman and that was the type of music I listened to then. So I was just like, oh yeah, this tracks so much. But I didn't know that was the director. I don't know why I assumed he'd be older, but
no, he wasn't. He was actually young.
He was like 24. It was a young actor. Yeah, that's what I was like. I was like, I didn't expect that. But that character was fun, and he wasn't in it for long because he just disappears and his dog just goes crazy and basically like helps in the murder. Shredded that poor girl apart.
Well, the funny thing is that dog was actually a dog used to kill people. So there was a whole story about that. Like I know they originally got a dog that like was trained for movies, but it was like too nice. And so they were like
so he wasn't a method actor. He had full experience.
Yeah. So like
they didn't have a dog actor.
They didn't have time to like reshoot or anything. So they like found these people that were like they talked like a different language.
Right.
Like
now, was it the same dog when he showed up at the fire then later? Because for some reason it looked like a different dog.
I think it was the same dog because I think the dog was sick too, right?
Well, there was the dead dog in the beginning of the movie, but the dog that he showed up with at the campfire on the leash, supposed to be the same dog that came and killed everybody. But it's like, for some reason, I want to say the dog's coloring just looked a little different. So I wasn't sure if it was the same dog or not.
But this dog, like, they couldn't actually have people in the scene with the dog because the dog.
Right. That's why I'm wondering if maybe they used two different dogs.
So they said, like, any scene that, like, you see the dog chasing, somebody, everybody was, like, hiding. They're like, all right, let the dog go. And everybody was, like, hiding behind cars and stuff, like, hiding from this dog.
They probably did use two dogs because, like, I think the dog that the Mambo in the beginning, Dr. Mambo, what is he, a professor or a doctor or whatever? He's a professor. No, he goes, he's a professor of being a dog. That was one of the stupidest lines that always makes me laugh. But anyway, he says, so Dr. Mambo, he puts up. Now, I thought this was a mistake. But if you watch the movie, and then I looked on IMDb goofs, and it was actually not a mistake, and I have to rewatch it sometime, kind of play it slowly. But Grimm, aka Eli Roth, walks says, come here, come Mr. Mambo, right? Or Dr. Mambo. Right. And as he says that, the dog's actually still tied up, right? He didn't untie him. However, I think what happens is he says, come on, Dr. Mambo. And then as he's walking, he looks like he's walking away, but he's actually walking and kneeling, getting the dog off the thing. So I think I just saw it wrong or whatever, because I don't know. I don't know. The way they put it. I just was like, wait, this seems weird. Like, why would he ask the dog to come when he's tied up?
Well, I mean, they did shoot it in like 26 days or something. I mean, so the reshoots were hard to come by, they said, so they probably just had to work with whatever they had.
And plus they shot it on film. This isn't like on video or anything. This isn't, so like film, you don't get like to the playback, you don't get to see what you just saw, what you just did. So not like film or video these days, so you have no idea if you even got what you want. So you have to go and actually check out dailies and do all these things. And I guarantee you,
a lot more work.
They were worried with 26 days or whatever that they were gonna
I'm sure
have like times that they weren't going to get exactly what they wanted. And for that, I very, very, very like happy. Now, another thing I wanted to mention was that Peter Jackson was a huge fan of this movie, and he was one of the reasons why this movie became the success he did, because him and like I think Sam Raimi and a couple other filmmakers, Quentin Tarantino and a couple other people, saw the movie ahead of everybody else, and started writing up notes about it. Peter Jackson actually stopped production of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, three times I read. He stopped three times.
3 times to show the cast and crew this movie. So it really, because we know Peter Jackson as not just the Lord of the Rings guy, but also the guy who brought us Meet the Feebles. So the guy loves his gore films and everything. So I love that he was a big fan of this series, and especially since the movie's still holds up really good, today. Now, given said that stuff that we mentioned earlier that might, whatever with the way the society kind of has headed toward, it still is really fucking amazing. I
still consider it like a classic.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a labor of love. And I mean, it's so funny too, because like, like every step of the way, there was a fight to get this movie made. And it really shows you, like, as independent filmmakers, like word of mouth and like having people like talk about your movie, it just shows like how important that is. Because I don't think this movie we wouldn't even be talking about it right now if it wasn't like the word of mouth, like the Peter Jackson was talking about it. And even like when it was bought at Toronto Film Festival, like it was only bought because they literally hired, like they spent like $20,000, which is indie people. We're like, oh my God, like 20,000. That's like our whole fucking budget on just like hiring like a publicist, like to get like the ball rolling, because like that movie wasn't even played. It was played on like the 7th day, I believe, at like midnight, and they were all like, nobody's gonna see this fucking movie, and like nobody's gonna want to buy it. So they hired a publicist, and like they did all this like promoting, and people were like talking about it, and then people went to see it, and then like it created a bidding war, and that's like why we're sitting here talking about it. It's kind of crazy.
Well, this movie could have, you're right. Absolutely right. This movie could have fell off and became a movie that we've never even heard of.
I mean, this movie's almost like if one of us, if 3 of us like made a movie, like this could be us, like this could be our story, I mean, right. I think that's why I love Eli Roth so much, because I mean, he's like one of us,
Mm-hmm. He's a horror fan who ended up making a horror film, then ended up making, a legacy, basically. Now he's got... he created a company right after this, and did the Hostel movies, and then he did, a shit ton of other movies. I mean,
Hostel also a really great movie.
Yeah, which I saw that in the theater and fucking loved it.
Yeah, like, that Achilles, somebody sliced Achilles tendon. Oh, it still gets me.
I just love, like, nowadays looking back at it, because when I rewatched it, I've become a really big fan of the TV show Suits, and there was the guy who's at the end is the American torture guy, or whatever, who looks kind of weird and whatnot. His name's Rick Hoffman. He's fantastic in Suits, and like he is. When I see him, I'm like, oh my God! Now it's just so weird seeing both of those, because like completely different characters, and stuff. But, whatever. It's wonderful. And then Hostel 2, he basically took Hostel 1 and made it all girls instead of guys, which I think he probably wanted to originally and just didn't do it, and whatnot. But and then here, Cabin Fever created a franchise. I'm surprised they haven't done like a part 4 or a series or something with it, because it definitely deserves that, it's one of those films I would watch. I gotta see part 3 at some point. I haven't, because I've heard so many negative things about it that it makes it hard for me to want to see it, but maybe I'll do that for like first time watch Friday sometime, Is
that the island? Is that the island one?
Yeah, I'm guessing, because I know the other one,
Patient Zero or something.
Yeah, Patient Zero. Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind watching them. It's just they're not really available for free on the streaming services. Even to watch this, I had to get a free 7-day trial just to watch it for free of some service.
Which I will say that is a problem with indie horror these days, except for Tubi. Tubi has a lot of good movies on there, a lot of questionable ones, or whatever. But I mean, what can you do about that?
And normally I don't mind spending a couple bucks to rent a movie, but when you have nothing in your account, you really want to watch the movie, you're like, all right, 7-day free trial, here we go.
Right.
I hope you've gotten rid of that free trial so you don't
don't forget to cancel.
I'm gonna make sure it's not on the auto. I'm gonna use it for the 7 days and make sure it doesn't renew.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of what you have to do these days for a lot of stuff. Just try it out, and then I usually get in that thing where I don't forget. I actually fall in love with this with the streaming service, so then I have another streaming service under my fucking belt. That I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever even watch this. But Shudder's one I love to death, but it's kind of taken.
Shudder is one of those hit and misses though, because PlayStation doesn't have an app for it, so the only way to watch it on the PlayStation is through Amazon, and the Amazon Shudder, which I have done a free trial of, is way different than the actual Shudder app.
So they don't have all the.
I have it on my phone where I can cast it to the TV or watch it on my phone, and the app gives you so many options of movies and TV channels, whereas when I were to do the Amazon trial of Shudder, it did not have as many things on it. It was kind of bare. So it is a different experience.
Well, speaking of streaming, I don't know if this will ever happen or not, but I wouldn't be surprised because of all the different companies that are getting into streaming, having their own streaming services, that Lionsgate might put out their own. And then if that's the case, they'll probably put out Cabin Fever and all those that they own eventually. But see, that's the problem is somebody's got to create a thing where they're all together. Like HBO Max and
a lot of these companies, so they have bidding wars of who has the rights to these movies, so they get the subscribers, because they want people to subscribe to them. So it sucks in that sense that they rotate or they have to bid on them.
Well, what I'm saying is what they need to do is they need to create a how Satellite has certain packages, and you can get certain shows or certain channels or whatever. I mean, if they created a package deal where you could get cheaper thing with all of the, almost all of them or whatever, more people would probably do that, because then, that's a way to get, a cheaper version or whatever, like $50 and you can get, HBO Max and all these other things instead of spending $100,
Well, I know on Friday night, when we're trying to watch a movie, I get frustrated because I'm like, okay, I want to watch this movie. And then I'm like, God, what app is it on? And then you have to go Google, 20 minutes later. And then you're like, forget it, never mind.
Yeah, that's always the fun part, is Googling. Okay, so I want to watch this. What streaming service is on? Do I have that one? Is it one that wants me to pay extra to watch it? But
most of my TVs have it where you can search, or Roku can search for, if you say I want to find Cabin Fever. You search Cabin Fever and it'll pop up saying it's on ePix.
Sometimes I don't just trust though that it gives me all my options, so I'm paranoid and I have to double check on the internet. So I'll do both. Because I'm like, what if there's an option it doesn't want to tell me about because it doesn't want me to go there and give them my money?
That's true.
So because it's all trickery. But yeah.
That's true. IMDb won't put up. You know how IMDb has the thing at the top where it says where things are going to be. If it's on HBO Max, it'll say HBO Max. Well, that's true, but it won't do that for Disney Plus. I guess IMDb and Disney Plus do not have a relationship, or whatever. So with that being said, Sam, you have some really cool stuff for us. So I want to save that for the end of the podcast, but you spoke with somebody, so tell us a little bit about that.
So I reached out to Eli Roth. So I'm a huge fan of Eli Roth, and I've talked to him a few times. I sent him a couple months ago my special effects that I was working on for my girlfriend, the serial killer, because I was very proud of them. And so I sent it to him and he was like, wow, he's like, that's really badass. So I know. I was like a little fangirl. But anyways, you know, I really respect him as a person, and like I like how he kind of like set up like the map to kind of help out indie filmmakers. So I just want to reach out to him and let him know that we're doing a podcast, like, you know, just out of like, we have mad respect for him. And I just want to know, so prior when we did it with Corey, you know, I just like to kind of get a quote from these people, to say, hey, we're doing a podcast. Would you like to, you know, give us a quote? So he gave me two things actually. He said, let's see, let me find it. I'm not prepared. Panicking. Okay. He said, make movies that only you want to make, was his first rule. And he said, always work on multiple projects at one time. Those were his two quotes that he wanted to give independent filmmakers. So there you go.
Wow. That's usually the exact opposite advice that people give.
And you're doing great.
Yeah, well, me and Sam's doing a lot of multiple projects.
Well, only because I'm picking on you. But no, the funny thing is when you said that, I was like, Moody.
Right? Exactly. As soon as you said that, I was like, there you go, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, yeah, but see, he's sort of right. Like, absolutely.
You don't want to have just one thing going. You kind of have to have a few backups. You know, you don't want all your eggs in one basket type scenario. You know,
he said too, like, you'll go crazy. He's like, a lot of times, like, even if you have to wait like 2 weeks for like to hear back on something, he's like, you know, he would stew like those 2 weeks. But he's like, you know, if I was working on multiple projects at one time, he's like, I just didn't have time.
You'd be distracted.
Yeah. You got distracted. So that's good. I like that. You know, way to go, Eli, for saying that, because like once again, that goes usually against most things people say. People are like, oh my God, I can't believe you're working on multiple projects, you know, concentrate on one. And I got ADHD up the wazoo. So
there's also like how many multiple projects, like enough to keep you distracted and busy and safe, or enough to be like pulling your hair out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you know, for now, thankfully, I'm mainly, you know, focusing on the Echo Lake Universe stuff mainly, you know, or whatever. So that's all like, you know, I'm there doing, but I get it. Like, I get that whole concept, because like at times, you know, we'll be working on Screen Queen Campfire, but we're also like working on that stuff because we're not, you know, shooting for another month, you know, or whatever. So like, it's like this trying to just get things done, and for a while you go a little crazy, so you know. But there, oh man, that's awesome. Well, thank you for that. Like, I love hearing that kind of stuff from you know, people like Eli, who obviously knows what the fuck they're talking about.
Well, and like, you know, with Cabin Fever, he was in New York and couldn't find anybody. I think it was like he was trying to find financing for like years, couldn't find anybody. Nobody was like, no, that's garbage. So he moved to LA, and when he moved to LA is when he came across one person that was like, oh, okay, like, let me give you like 300,000. And then they went with it, and then they started shooting like right away, and like it still wasn't enough money, but he was like, oh well, he's like, let's just do it. And I remember he said that like there was days where he was like, I don't know if we're gonna have enough money to film the next day. So he was like, a lot of shoots, he just didn't know. He's like, they couldn't eat. I mean, they were like poor. Like a lot of people was like taking turns. Like one person wouldn't pay their rent 1 month. And then, so they just finally like made enough of the movie where it was like 10 minutes of, it wasn't a trailer, but it was like just a highlight reel of like all the gore and stuff. And they used that to get like another like $500,000. And then they could they made the rest of it.
Well, that's amazing. So there you go. Like but
how hard is that though, right? Like, I mean, I'm just trying to picture like me, right? Or like us, like doing that, like to put all of your eggs, you know, because like at this point he had all this money invested, not his money, mind you. And he was he took such a chance on it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for people to do that.
Well, also because like there's this risk right there that you just said, but basically like if you fail, like, you know how hard it's gonna be to like get people to trust you to give money for another thing that big. Now, nowadays it's a little easier because we have crowdfunding, or we have it's lower cost. He spent $1.5 million on a movie. That's a big risk right there. But us doing like 20,000 or 50,000, and usually it's just a bunch of donators who, or whatever, we're still taking a risk, because there might be a chance that like it doesn't get distribution, or we're not able to like fund everything, or whatever.
Yeah, but there's still a little difference though, because Indiegogo, like they're volunteering to give you money. Like that's different, I mean, they're investing in the movie, but it's like, they're still giving you money to support your project. They're not getting anything back, unless like they got a perk, to like, back end perk or whatever.
Or
but like
to
with
act in
this,
it or
like,
whatever. Yeah.
He had investors that he had to pay back and then some. So I mean, it's a little different.
Yeah, a little bit different. And I totally agree, but it's sort of like we sort of live in a very simpler time now, where we can shoot things on 4K with like very cheap, amount of money, like it doesn't cost us, that we can check our stuff. We can do things for less time. We don't need 26 days to shoot a movie. We can do it in 14, because we can actually check all our stuff and get, what I mean? So it's a little bit different time period now. And if he had made Cabin Fever now, I don't think it would have, I hate saying this sounds terrible, but it wouldn't have done the success that it got him that got him, because it would have just felt like another movie shot for 20K out in the woods in a cabin with, what I mean? Like, to me, because he would have spent less money, and it just wouldn't have, it felt like $1 million movie when you saw that movie. It felt like all that money was there. If he shot it for 50K, I don't think it would have been nearly the success that the movie did, because of how, amazing that they made that, for that amount of money. So I always tell people are like, oh, you're never going to make you're never going to make $1 million. You could say, Sam, you could be like, well, Eli Roth did, back in 2002. So like, why can't you, like, I don't understand all this negativity about, spending more money, when that's people like Lionsgate. They want those. They don't want 20K movies. They don't want crap. They want something good with good stars and, good effects and a good story, and that's exactly what Cabin Fever is.
Well, and that's also hard to come by in indie land too, like all of that, I mean, you can have like one thing or maybe two things, but because it's so low budget, like you can't afford everything, so something's got to go. It's either the sound, the acting, like one of those is not going to be good.
I so wish I could have hung out with like Eli Roth and Quentin Tarantino together, just them together, or whatever, because I guarantee you the stuff that they talk about is like beyond anything that we can comprehend.
It makes me sad though, because I feel like I wouldn't have the same, like, like bro code. Like, you're a man, so you hanging out with them, I feel like would be a lot different than like if me or Sarah was hanging out with them now. I mean, I hate to, like bro Hollywood.
And it's also
fair. It's not fair.
Well, it's well, unless if they treated you like a bro, they could do that. Like, I'm sure there's. I remember hearing a story that Danielle Harris got invited to go like watch a movie out at Quentin Tarantino's house. And she did it. I believe. Like, who's going to turn that down?
Right.
Like. And I think it's you probably with
we all know what that's code for, right, Sarah? Anytime some guy's like, "Hey, let's go watch a movie," you're like, okay.
I don't want to say that, because I don't know that, but I know she got asked to do that. I mean, it's one of those things where you're just like, that's kind of cool. I don't know. I think the thing is what what attracts those kind of people are the love of the movie making process, love of movies and stuff. And Eli Roth and Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez and all those guys, Kevin Smith, all those guys basically have that love of movies.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure them talking about their passion would just be very enlightening, especially to somebody who's a filmmaker like yourself.
Yeah, or they would talk about movies I've never seen before, and I'd be like, oh my god, I need to see that movie. That sounds amazing. Especially horror stuff, because I guarantee you that's what Eli talks about. And Tarantino talks about everything else, that's not just one specific genre. But I would just love that because, that would just drive me nuts.
I've been watching the Eli Ross, what is it? The History of Horror. Have you guys watched that yet?
That's on Shudder, right? If I'm correct.
I think it's on one of them. It's really interesting though. I like it.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. My friends were telling me about it and stuff. It's just I haven't got a chance to. It's really hard to watch anything that I'm not reviewing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's funny. Even today, I watched Doctor Strange, and I'm reviewing that. So it's not even like I'm watching it just for fun. I'm gonna be like looking at it in a different sense. So I don't know. It's weird nowadays. I can't enjoy anything anymore. It doesn't seem like I have to. It has to be work in some way or another. Except some TV shows. TV shows I'm not reviewing. I'm just watching them for fun. Unless anybody wants me to do a Melrose Place podcast.
I was more of a 90210 kind of gal.
See, I think people can separate themselves from that. Were you a 90210 guy or was it? Yeah,
I didn't watch either one of those. I watched Boy Meets World.
Yeah, I watched Boy Meets World.
I grew up on TGIF and
I grew up on TGIF.
But what is it? Years later, I was like, well, I want to check out this Melrose Place, and I was like, oh, it's good. Then I tried watching Beverly Hills 90210, and I was like, I can't get back into teen stuff anymore. High school shit.
Original 90210, but when they redid it with one of the girls from Degrassi, I did watch all of that because I do like my teen stuff.
They did that, and then they also redid Melrose Place as well, and which they did, but it didn't. It did so terribly that Paramount Plus won't even put it out.
Oh, gee.
Wow, that says a lot.
Yeah, it's just what in the world is wrong with everything? But anyway, we've talked about everything, and we've talked about Cabin Fever a lot in this episode, so I don't want to feel like we didn't, but I want to thank you so much, Sam, for coming on here and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
Anytime you're talking Eli Roth or Kevin Bacon, call me.
Yes, she's a huge Kevin Bacon fan. So Tremors and all that stuff that's her jam.
Yeah.
So when I could see her face light up when you said Tremors.
I know. Well, the funny thing is so I just actually switched from an iPhone to a Galaxy. And you know how there's Surrey, and Galaxies, the little voice lady, it's Bixby, which is the town from Tremors. And I was like, oh! I had a nerdgasm. I was like, Bixby!
Wait, that's his name? That's the Galaxy's name?
That's the little the voice talker thingy. Its name's Bixby. So if I want to say something, I say, hey Bixby. And that's the town.
The thing I don't use that's constantly going off on my phone, and I'm like, not you.
Yes, that's Bixby.
Is that Bixby? Or so do you have a Galaxy too?
Yeah, I have a Galaxy with a Bixby. I just don't use it, so it just likes to kind of butt in when I'm not trying to, and I'm just like, ugh.
I only use it just to literally say, hey Bixby, and then
she gets it. Oh wow, she gets a little bit of an attitude. Okay.
I just like to do everything in secret and in quiet. I don't want to talk to my phone and have everybody else hear me and hear what I'm looking up and what I'm doing. So I'm like, I'm just gonna type it in. Nobody knows what I'm Googling.
That's funny. Well, this has been awesome. I love this. And yes, you're very welcome back. I think starting next year, we've talked about it. Sarah and I have talked about it before, but I think we're going to just do video. So it's not going to be podcast. This was podcast. But the next starting next year, I think it's going to end up being on our YouTube channel because we're still trying to use a lot of that. So, but this one is a podcast because we're finishing up the season on Indie Film Cafe. And so thank you so much. This is awesome. I enjoy anything Cabin Fever. I love that movie, and I watched the unrated version, so I saw a couple extra scenes that weren't in the original, I don't think, but I couldn't tell. I think there was a couple things, and I was just like, that doesn't look familiar, but I'm not sure if I'm just not remembering it or not.
True.
It didn't. But I will say, if anybody wants to get the movie, I would suggest unless they make like a 4K with like the Blu-ray and the DVD stuff in together. I would suggest watching the DVD because the DVD has commentary from like 5 different like commentary tracks or something. It's ridiculous, but so much information. Like just listening to, my favorite one was listening to Ryder and Eli Roth talk about the fact that was it Eli Roth said something about and it's in the it's in the trivia, but apparently Ed Con was bloody and walked out, and a bunch of schoolgirls saw him and
I read that.
And freaked out and stuff, because at first they freaked out because, oh my God, there's a guy all bloody. Then they freaked out because there's Sean from Boy Meets World. Oh my God.
Right.
And they start running at him.
Is he in trouble?
Right.
But they start running toward him because they want to meet him. And he's like, it starts running away.
Yeah, he's like, I'm never going to go off on my own again.
Yeah. That's a smart, especially in North Carolina,
Right?
North Kakalaka.
It's not as bad as West Virginia, though. And, Hills Have Eyes.
Or Wrong Turn.
Wrong Turn. Yeah, Wrong Turn.
I think Hills Have Eyes might have been the desert or something.
Yeah, no, I was thinking Wrong Turn.
Yeah, Wrong Turn is West Virginia. Unless you watch the new Wrong Turn, which makes it Virginia.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense whatsoever. All of that whole thing. I hated that. We talked about that on
that whole movie didn't make sense.
We talked about that on Hard Blood and Coffee, and we're just like, that movie is
angered. We were angered.
I know.
Still angered. I don't want to talk about it.
Which is funny because that was like one of the first times you heard me.
We never agreed.
Yeah, we never agreed until then, and then we agreed. Like that was it. So thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. Join us next month where Sarah's got one. I forgot which one you got planned. I don't know if you.
I don't remember either. I'm gonna have to look at the list, but I bet you it's either gonna be a crazy girl or it's gonna be a horror comedy, because those are my 2 go-tos. You know me.
Yeah.
So
usually she likes the crazy girl ones. Like, what's the one we did the other couple months
we
ago?
did May, and we also did The Loved Ones. Those are some of my 2 crazy girl ones that we've recently done. And I just watched American Mary again because I hadn't seen that forever. And that was also like, it had its moments where I was like, but it was also another amazing movie.
Have you seen The Loved Ones, Sam?
I don't
It's
think
an
so.
Australian movie.
That was
It's
really
an Australian
good.
crazy girl movie, which we did a review on it, or a podcast on it. And no, crazy girl gets rejected and murders. So it's pretty cool.
A prom,
Right.
it's kind of got a little bit Carrie kind of prom thing, but
Yeah,
it doesn't. She doesn't go to prom. She has her own little prom, and it's just crazy.
Right.
It's a crazy
Yeah.
movie. Like,
Yeah.
you'll have to see it sometime. It's just
I wrote it down.
Yeah,
What did we watch? I think we watched it on Pluto TV for free.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for saving me like 20 minutes of my life.
Trying to find it for free somewhere.
Right. It's one of those movies you find in like the $5 bin, kind of like Cabin Fever and whatnot. Like, it's kind of one of those like movies that I thought was really good, but most people have never even heard about it. And it's an Australian film, and
I hadn't.
like, if you like crazy girls who murder boys who don't love them, then it's great.
Yeah.
May's the same way. May's
I've seen May. I like May.
Yeah, that was a good one. I know we've got some really fun ones planned, so I'm looking forward to this season. So with that being said, thank you guys all for checking this out. Join us next month for Sarah's episode.
Yep.
And once again, thank you all for coming on tonight.
Yes, thanks. It's finally nice meeting you, Sarah. I've seen you on Facebook and stuff.
All right. Well, have a good one,
We'll
guys.
definitely have you back on as a guest.
All right, great.
We'll try to make something with Kevin Bacon in it for you, though.
Girlgasm. Thank you.
Or you guys stay on, but everybody else for listening, and thank you for listening, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.
Bye.